Are you looking forward to the holiday period? You might have the impression that everyone else is really excited about this time of year, but the stories that I hear in my therapy office tell a very different tale. It's pretty common to have some trepidation about this time of year, or at the very least, some mixed feelings. My name is Ruth Ann. I'm a clinical psychologist and an expert in relationships and issues of narcissism. And in this video, I'm going to try to help you think about how to navigate difficult and fraught family relationships in ways that allow you to take care of yourself and also give you the best possible opportunity to improve the relationships that you're in. I also recognize that change in relationships takes everyone involved to play a part, and the other people in your life may or may not be willing to do that. And so I also completely understand and respect that some people make a decision not to spend the holiday period with family. If you're spending this holiday period alone, do stay tuned to the end because I do talk a little bit about managing loneliness and being alone at this time of year. This is by no means a complete guide to navigating the holiday period with difficult family. So please do share your own experiences in the comments and suggestions of things that might have helped you because it might well help someone else. When we go back to our own families, we will often find ourselves pulled into familiar relationship patterns, into old stories, old ways of behaving, old patterns in our relationship. And that's not surprising. After all, the families that we come from are probably where we develop the patterns that we have in our relationship. And it's easy to fall back into old ways of being. Sometimes you might find that you act like a completely different person in your family compared to how you are in other situations. And if you're visiting a partner's family over a holiday period, you probably will get to see different sides of your partner, and you also get to see something of the environment in which their relationship patterns developed. That can be quite revealing. A really good place to start can be to reflect on who we become in our families. What are the patterns that we revert back to? And how do those patterns help us? How did they help us in the past? How do they help us now? How did they hinder us in the past and how do they hinder us now? You might also find it really helpful to reflect on relationships where you have a very different pattern. Maybe you have a different pattern in your work relationships or in your friendships or even in the relationship you have with your partner. And it can be very interesting and quite helpful to have a think about what is it about those relationships that allow different parts of you, different relationship patterns to come to the fore. And are there versions of yourself that you may wish to bring into your family dynamic? I often think that in any relationship pattern, there's often two competing dynamics that interact with each other, and they may kind of push and pull each other a little bit. It can be helpful to remember that these aspects of our relationships are not good or bad, they just are, and that actually in a healthy relationship, we probably need attention between them both. One classic example of such a dynamic is when one person in a relationship seeks closeness and intimacy, and the other seeks space and autonomy. One person may have a tendency to overreach their boundaries, to extend themselves and to sacrifice themselves for relationships. Another person may be protective and be a very strong guard against that kind of intrusion, to hold their boundaries very strongly. So in thinking about these relationship patterns, it can be really helpful to think, which part of this pattern do you most relate to, and where might it help you to loosen up and flex a little bit? And also can be really helpful to think about the other person in this pattern and what they relate to and what they're trying to do. And sometimes there's a degree of compromise and that's possible. And if one person who's more intimacy seeking actually takes a step back and makes more space, that can actually make it easier for the person who wants more space and autonomy to come a little bit closer. And likewise, if you're the person who wants space and autonomy, if you allow yourself to give a little more and to get closer, the person who's seeking intimacy can actually relax a little bit and probably give you more space and autonomy. So if you're the person who's seeking closeness and intimacy and not really feeling like other people are giving it back, have a think about, what does that represent for you? Is that a sense of abandonment, aloneness, of never really having your emotional needs met? Is there a much younger part of you that's just seeking closeness and security? Recognizing those early needs and how important they were can be a really helpful first step to comfort yourself, to give yourself some reassurance. And recognizing that can maybe allow you to just relax a little bit and allow the other person space. Because when you allow them space and they're free to come and go, you'll actually have the experience that they may well come to you and you'll know that they're coming willingly. And if your relationships are such that you have people who prefer that kind of distance and autonomy, and that's difficult for you, it may be helpful for you to think about, are there some relationships within your family or within your friends where you do have a greater sense of security, and can you draw on that as you navigate the holiday period? Now, if you're the person who seeks autonomy and freedom and you feel really put upon when people make demands on you and ask you for closeness and intimacy, then it may be really helpful for you to reflect on, what is it about your past and your history that gives you that need for freedom and autonomy? What is it that you're trying to kind of get away from? And it can be helpful to recognize that you're an adult now and things may be a little bit different. Is it possible for you to relax a little bit, to give a little more of yourself, which may actually allow other people to relax a little bit? The tension between the person who seeks intimacy and closeness and the one who seeks freedom and autonomy is a really classical tension in any couple's relationship and in any family. And I have a few practical suggestions that I think can be really helpful for both parties. One of the biggest challenges of the holiday season, in my opinion anyway, is that you get all your family together, all your dysfunctional family dynamics, you put loads of pressure on everyone, and then you lock everyone in a house and there's no escape because nothing is open. Like, what a recipe for disaster. So some things I might suggest is, rather than kind of thinking about meeting with family all in a house, all together, are there shared activities that you can do that would allow you to spend time together, to play, to have some enjoyment, to have something to talk about? That just kind of lessens the intensity of it and allows for connection in a way that can feel a little bit safer for people who tend to want to withdraw and get away. And it also gives a kind of sense of freedom and playfulness in that intimacy and connection to the person who may want more closeness and intimacy. Now, another really common dynamic I see is that one person in a family becomes very demanding and quite critical of other people and wants to organize and control everything, and another becomes very compliant, quiet, placating, and people-pleasing. And that's a really interesting dynamic to reflect on. So if you're the person who's more demanding and critical and controlling, take a moment to think about, what is it that you're doing? What are you aiming to do here? The chances are that your intentions are good, even if some of your behaviors are difficult for the people around you. Are you fearing that if things are not perfect, people will leave? Are you seeing the family holiday and everything going well as a reflection of your self-worth and your value? Take a moment to recognize that, and then also take a moment to relax and realize that criticism and demandingness are probably not going to serve your intentions well. Can you let go a little bit? Embrace things being imperfect or not going according to plan. And just be a little bit more at ease and cut people some slack and see how that feels. And when you notice that kind of part of you coming up that wants to be critical, that's a really good moment to take a pause and remind yourself of the effect that your criticism is going to have on other people, so you can serve the higher goal of having a fun, good time together. So what if you're the person who tends to be more compliant, quiet, placating in that situation? Well, take a moment to ask yourself, what are you fearful of if you were to speak up? If you were to say, that's not okay with me, or no, I really don't want to do that, or I would like to do this. What keeps you quiet? What are you afraid would happen if you displease someone? Maybe you're anxious about it ending up in a row or an argument. Maybe you even have a fight mode that you would rather not bring out. Maybe you have a side of you that might get very defensive and come out all guns blazing. Maybe that's your reaction to that very critical, demanding person. And again, it can be really helpful to just take a moment to ask yourself, why is it that I do that? What am I aiming to do there? And how can I better serve my intentions? How can I better communicate my needs? How can I better assert myself? And in a way that gives the best possible chance for this relationship to improve. So you can practice very calmly and watch your tone of voice and practice with other people. Practice in front of a mirror saying, I don't like that. Don't like when you say those kind of things. I know you're just trying to give us the best holiday possible, but this kind of criticism, I don't think it's your intention to upset me, but it does. Or our relationship's really important to both of us, and I don't think either of us are at our best. You might be at your best, but using we language is much less accusatory and is much more likely to get a positive response than saying, you are not at your best right now. But take a moment to say, look, I don't think we're at our best right now, so let's just take a break. I'm going to take a break because I'd like to, and then we can come back to it later. If the situation you're in is really, really tough and you can't assert yourself, at the very least, take a little bit of time to be with yourself and acknowledge the impact that it has on you. Acknowledge it to yourself. Acknowledge it maybe to your partner if your partner is supportive. Acknowledge it to a good friend. And have a little conversation with your hurting self, acknowledging the impact of this kind of behavior on you so you don't feel invisible. You don't feel like you're betraying yourself. Another really common dynamic at this time of year is overgiving, violating your own boundaries in terms of your finances or the time and the energy that you give to other people. Or the flip side of that is becoming overly protective and overly controlling of your time, keeping other people out to avoid being encroached upon or put upon. It can be really helpful to ask, why do you do that? So if you're the person who tends to be overgiving, are you fearful of rejection? Do you fear that people won't accept you if you don't give more than what you have the resources to give? And if that's the case, it may be really helpful to slow down a little bit and hold your own boundaries and see what it feels like, see how people respond. And you can be quite explicit with people about what you can afford or the time that you have available. What I'd also suggest to you is think as well about your own needs. So if you're very giving to other people, what needs in you do you end up neglecting? And are there ways to build that into the holiday season? Can you make space for activities that you find nourishing, whether that's activities by yourself or activities with friends or other people that you will find enjoyable and that might be important to you? Or can you schedule some of that for after the holiday season so at least you know it's coming? And if you tend to be overly protective and kind of pushing people away and stopping that kind of encroachment, again, I'd ask yourself, what is that doing for you? What's the history of that behavior? What is it that you want to prevent from encroaching upon you? Is it that you think people will ask too much of you, demand too much of you, won't give you your freedom and autonomy, will crush you, will silence you, will imprison you, will suffocate you? It's really interesting to think about what are those feelings and where do they come from? And that can help you understand the function of some of these behaviors. And then you can ask yourself, is there scope to loosen up a little bit here? To let other people take the lead and see how that feels. I'm not saying throw all your boundaries out of the water or overextend yourself, but it can be interesting just to experiment with changing your behavior pattern and seeing how it feels and what effect it has on your relationships. Holiday season is a prime time for the tension between novelty and predictability. There are those amongst us who hold to tradition, who want things to stay the same year after year after year. And that may give you a sense of security, a sense of predictability, a sense of importance perhaps. But relationships and family and life tends to evolve. And it might be interesting for you to experiment with loosening up a little bit, with embracing some new ideas and doing something different. And what if you're the person who seeks novelty, who wants to do something different? It can be really interesting to reflect, is there something in tradition or in previous experience that you're trying to get away from? Maybe it's a sense of obligation. Maybe it's a sense of inauthenticity because you're engaging in traditions that don't really feel right to you, that don't resonate for you, perhaps religious traditions that you don't connect with. So again, could be just really interesting to reflect on those things and what they mean for you. And then also ask yourself, are there things that you'd like to compromise on? Are there some traditions that you might like to engage in, perhaps for the sake of other people, whilst also engaging in some new things too? You can also think about ways that you can improve the context in which your relationship dynamics are happening. So here are a few ways in which you may be able to adjust the context to give your relationships the best possible chance in the holiday season. Think about the time of day that you visit. Now, this is really variable as to what's going to be best. So you've got to think about your family and your needs and your priorities. And one thing to consider with this is alcohol consumption, because when people drink alcohol, that's much more likely that inhibitions are lowered, fights happen, arguments happen. So think about if that's an issue, that's maybe something to bear in mind. For some people, doing family visits in the morning when children are up and excited can actually be quite fun. People haven't had the chance to get that drunk yet, so the alcohol is not such a prominent part of the picture. For other people, visiting at the end of the day may be helpful. So this means that you don't actually have to go through the challenge of saying, I'm leaving now, while other people are still in full flow. And it may also mean that you come after things like meal times, because meal times can be another amazing source of tension over the holiday period. I don't know what it is about meal times and the holidays, but it does seem to bring out a tendency to comment on what other people are eating and whether they've lost weight or gained weight. And if that's something that's really difficult, maybe an area where you need to work on being assertive and saying, that's not okay with me. Or it may be an area where you're like, this is not going to change in this family. They're always going to be like this. And so do I want to tolerate meal times with them? Or do I want to say, you know what, I'm not up for this. And maybe you don't want to have meal times. Maybe you want to go later in the day, so you're going after the main meal. Or you want to go early in the day and you leave before. Here's something else to think about. Think about where you park your car and who is going to be the designated driver if you're traveling with a partner or other people. If you park your car and other people park their car behind you and you have to ask other people to move their cars before you leave, that can create a bit of a scene around leaving. So think about where you park your car, so when the time comes for you to leave, it's easy to get away. And I'm also a big fan of having shared activities that people can do together and have fun, because that can bring a sense of playfulness and enjoyment and connection without intense emotional conversations. And I think that's really helpful for bonding and connection. You might also face at this time of year a tension between wanting alone time and wanting to be with other people. So think about which of those tensions is more of an issue for you. Are you someone who wants to plan more time with other people or a wider range of people so you have that kind of social contact? And do you need to carve out some alone time, some me time, so that you're not constantly going and visiting people and constantly busy and constantly being around people, especially if you're someone who finds that draining? So in this holiday period, do make time for you. Make time for the activities that you may find helpful. What do you find nourishing? Are you someone who likes to do a little bit of baking? Are there movies or TV programs you want to watch? Do you want to steal away for an hour or two with a good book or listen to a podcast? Get outside, go for a walk. Don't be sat in the house. Think about the activities that you can do that build you up again, so that when you are going into kind of intense social situations, you're a little more nourished and you have that balance between connection with other people and time for yourself and the things that you like and the things that sustain you. I also think you don't have to spend your entire Christmas with family. There may be friends that you want to keep in touch with because they bring a kind of lighter-hearted spirit and they allow you to maintain a sense of connection, especially if relationships in your family are tense and tend to leave you feeling quite depleted and undermined. Do make time and space for those friendships and relationships that are sustaining for you, even if it's a few text messages or a quick FaceTime call. Finally, what if you're someone who's decided to opt out of family this year? What if you're going to be spending this holiday period alone? I also think it's helpful to think about a tension between being alone and being connected with other people. That's really relevant if you're spending a lot of time by yourself. And when you have this holiday period alone, you might find that there's two tendencies. You may try to fill a kind of void with lots and lots of activities, and that can actually end up being quite depleting, and you can still feel very lonely in a crowd. So I think one of the ways to manage that is to think about this as a time to reach inward, to really give yourself time and space to do things and engage in things that are really nourishing and nurturing for you. And that can really be anything. Maybe you want to take long walks. Maybe you want to write, journal, read, listen to podcasts, watch movies or documentaries, things that really interest you. Give yourself the time and space to really get into those activities and enjoy them. At the same time, you are still a social creature. As a human being, you're still a social animal. So you will need to reach out to other people. It's quite unlikely that you're going to be the only person in your social circle who's spending the holiday period by yourself. So have a think about who's around, look around, and be brave. Make some suggestions to people. Ask them if they'd like to spend time with you over the holiday period. And including those people who may have families, because they may be very happy to escape their family and have some relaxed time with you. So don't be afraid to extend invitations and give yourself the opportunity to have some social contact and relationships that are going to be helpful and sustaining for you through this period. You can also consider, are there ways in which you can use this period to be giving to other people as well as giving to yourself? And so some people I've worked with have actually found it really helpful to voluntary work in the holiday period. And that can be something that they find really meaningful and that really helps them feel valued. And it also allows for social connection, but not so much the family tensions. I hope you found this video helpful. Leave a comment and share your experiences of navigating the holiday period with challenging family dynamics. Please do hold your boundaries and take extra good care of yourself over the holiday period. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, take good care.